RuneScape is a game that needs updates to all kinds of systems and content. Chances are you probably thought of something like the tick system or the character rework just then. Well, both of those have one thing in common, which is that they aren't happening anytime soon, if ever. In this video, I'd like to go over some PvM related updates that RuneScape needs, most of which aren't all that unreasonably difficult to implement. Whenever you're ready, grab your cup of tea, sit back, relax, and enjoy. One of my biggest pet peeves is activating and switching archaeology relic powers. It's not necessarily a difficult or time-consuming thing in itself, but it still frustrates me from time to time. I usually switch out my relics for different combat setups, like when switching between combat styles or changing from an active to a passive AFKable setup. If you're skilling, chances are you'll be swapping around some relics as well. So how could all of this be solved? Well, quite simply, relic power presets. All it would have to be is a system that saves your setup in some sort of drop-down favorites menu. I don't think this is an unreasonably difficult thing to add into the game either. It could easily be a part of some game jam update or community hit list. What do you guys think? Let me know down in the comments below. Another problem I run into is wanting to use different perks for certain bits of content. The majority of players will only have a single armor and weapon setup for a specific combat style if they even have a high-level setup for every single combat style at all. You can only place one, or depending on the gear, two gizmos in a single piece of equipment. And as players will not have 5 or 6 different armor setups of the same type, that gizmo needs to be perfect for the majority of content you're doing. But what if you want to do a specific bit of content that needs a certain perk? Well, right now your options would be either to dissolve the gizmo and place a new one in the equipment, which will cost you a gizmo, and if it's an expensive, let's say, biting perk, then that sucks. Or you could use an equipment separator, which is an expensive item to create, and separate the two from each other, but that will require you to have the item at equipment level 15. This problem really arises when you want to do specific content and do it optimally, like AFKing Gregorovic with the Venom Blood perk, or farming a certain Slayer creature with the Coroming perk on your magic staff because you want to hit additional targets with Greater Chain, or in other cases, regular chain. Now, I don't really buy additional gear for this usually because it's just super expensive and annoying to do, but I do have multiple magic staves in my bank for a reason. Now, a player by the name of Chipapa has mentioned and shared a visual of what could solve this problem on Twitter, and I'm all for something like this. Imagine being able to select whichever gizmo you'd like to use based on gizmos you've added to a piece of equipment. And then instead of adding 2, you could add 6 or maybe even 8 and simply pick the 2 ones you want to have active at that point in time. This would add a level of flexibility to RuneScape that I think it's currently missing. Since we're on the topic of invention, I believe making all components and materials tradable in some shape or form is a good idea. I don't see why there needs to be a difference between archaeology's components and, well, pretty much everything else. Why can we sell historic and ancient materials in crates, but not Ilujankan or Noxious components? You could already buy items created with components that mostly are valued at what they're at because of the invention components inside. Think a Luck of the Dwarves or the Greater Death Swiftness and Sunshine ability codices. I feel like adding every material and component to the Grand Exchange would allow the RuneScape workforce to make a profit for their material farming habits and the lazy main game players to skip a grind. I mean, we are a Mainscape account after all, not Iron Man. Or maybe I'm just an extremely lazy Mainscape player, but the next update RuneScape needs, I'm sure you can agree with. A potion reservoir. Ever since those PvM events where we had Overload Golems, or Thox event, which is going on right now, Elder Overload Cauldrons, players have been asking for something like this. How intuitive is it to just click something and then have an hour of overload? Everything about this is just quality of life. The system's already there. All it needs is some adjustment, which would be adding inputs, which would be your overloads from your bank. You would add them in noted form to this cauldron, and you would have overload hours for as many overloads as you add. If you only have 1 dose left, it wouldn't give you an hour, but instead 6 minutes, and so on. Now, this system would solve 2 problems. One is kind of already in the game with potion reservoirs, but they feel crappy to use which is sipping your overloads, keeping an eye on your potion timers. And 2, needing to decant your potions. If everything's in your overload cauldron, you don't need to worry about decanting your potions. You're not going to get half an overload back. They're in there. I really don't see the downside of adding this into the game except for potion reservoirs becoming dead content. It's a better system in every way. Since we're on the topic of decanting items, I think it's also worth mentioning another update RuneScape needs, being automatic decanting when banking your potions or blubbers or anything else that can be eaten in different parts or phases like pizzas. If you could simply bank and every part, let's say a bunch of blubbers that are a 1 byte or a 2 byte, automatically get combined, how nice would that be? I'm starting to wonder if I'm extremely lazy, but these updates are just quality of life, okay? It's not lazy, it's not me being lazy, it's quality of life. When I think of PvM updates that RuneScape needs, it's usually the big stuff, like bad luck mitigation to every boss, or improved practice mode with visual feedback and being able to pick where you start the fight. But I already know that those things are simply not going to happen. However, the things I've just mentioned in this video, I don't think are all that difficult to implement. Sure, there will be dev time related to it, but I think they're quite realistic. And hopefully JMod watches this, or other players start thinking, hey, I kind of want this, and it might be, included in a community hit list in the future, or part of a JMod's game jam if they are interested enough in it. But with that being said, we've come to the end of this video. If you enjoyed it, leave a like down below and maybe even consider subscribing, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.